Welcome, members of the public who are joining us today. We are in camera and on the record in a public format here, so let me just begin with giving some up-to-date information that some of you may not have access to. On August 21st, the governor and the lieutenant governor hosted a regional council summit in Albany to hear from regional council co-chairs and a select number of regional council members on the economic successes that have occurred as a result of the regional council initiatives. The all-day meeting featured progress updates from each of the 10 regions on the implementation of the strategic plans and their respective transformational projects, as well as a discussion of best practices based on the first-year experience of the regional councils. Several key commissioners and state leaders were also in attendance, including the Director of State Operations, Howard Glazer, Labor Commissioner Peter Rivera, Housing Commissioner Darrell Towns, Port Authority Executive Director Patrick Foya, and ESD President Ken Adams. I was unable to be at that important summit. I was giving a major presentation that I could not excise myself from, and I was delighted that Stuart Applebaum and Marcia Keyes represented the New York City Regional Economic Development Council at the summit. I was told by a number of people, state elected officials and appointed members of the Cuomo administration, that we did really well. So I very much appreciate your work, Marcia. And I've already told Stuart Applebaum that we are grateful for his way that he comported himself. Is there anything, Marcia, do you want to add anything to what I said?
Well, just really to note, Chancellor, that it took both Stu and I to stand in your shoe, as it were. But I think that we had a very vibrant discussion. We were able to listen to all of the other reports. We felt quite equal to the other reports. And we really quite enjoyed as well some of the discussion and the questions that were raised. And we were able, I think, to represent the council quite well. It was a good, long day. We were really up close and personal, if you will, with both the lieutenant governor and the governor, and we shared a lot of good conversation with similarly situated individuals around the state. I felt quite privileged, frankly, to represent the council and indeed to represent the chancellor. Stu certainly did the same. I think together we were able to put a very good face on the work that we've done.
Thank you, Marcia. I very much appreciate it. Let me also state that at our last meeting on June 26, we heard from Suri Deitch and Shane Spalding, both of whom work at CUNY, who made a presentation on CUNY's Jobs Task Force final report entitled Jobs for New York's Future. The Lieutenant Governor and Ken Adams knows from me that we were asked, the university, was asked by U.S. News and World Report to help them put together, really take a lead in helping them put together a major STEM conference, which we helped for a similar event in Dallas. I heard from Mort Zuckerman and from the editor-in-chief, David Kelly of U.S. News and World Report, that they were actually knocked over by the Jobs Task Force report, that they had seen many other Jobs Task but this one was the most comprehensive and most helpful. And so I encourage all of you who may not have yet read that very comprehensive report. It's really not only a blueprint, but a real gaze into the future about how universities and corporate America can join hands to work on one of the most challenging problems that we face as a society, providing the necessary highly skilled workforce as an enabler and as a catalytic event to create jobs by companies coming to this city, to the state, with the confidence that the work that they need to get done will get done because there will be the highly skilled and educated task force report with jobs. I'm repeating myself again because we're in public session, but what I said earlier was in private session, but I think for the public we need to report again. We also received a report from Kathy Wild on the Council's implementation agenda of the 2012 progress report. We'll be hearing more from Kathy again in just a few minutes. In addition, Ken Knuckles, chair of the scoring committee, provided an overview of the CFA scoring process, including the new regional council statewide endorsement standards and the timeline and the process for the scoring.
Chancellor.
Yes, sir.
Could I amend that report to express on behalf of the committee our thanks to Joe Tazwell for his support throughout the process?
Okay. I have a testimonial for Joe, and I know he's a patient man. I want to hold the best for last, but thank you for that, Ken. We also announced that Gary LaBarbera and Steve Spinola would co-chair a new committee on development infrastructure with assistance from Deputy Mayor Bob Steele and his staff. The purpose of the committee is to look at the implementation of individual projects being supported by the council, and also to look more generally at development and infrastructure issues that interest the council, such as waterfront development. Finally, we heard from 33 individuals representing the various organizations and businesses, as well as the City of New York, who presented priority projects for the council's consideration. In our executive session today, earlier today, the council approved its 2012 progress report on the implementation status of our 5-year strategic plan and a list of recommended priority projects for capital funding and Excelsior tax credits. There was an opportunity for the public to comment on the draft progress report last Friday afternoon, September 7th, and an open forum at the City College of New York. I'd now like to call on Kathy Wild again, chair of the Writing Committee, to summarize the Council's 2012 progress report and list of priorities for the public to hear. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. I'll try not to be long and redundant. The progress report is both a report on last year's projects, what we've done in terms of the council structure to make sure that our implementation plan is strong, and incorporation of some of the recommendations of the review committee from last year as to ways in which we could strengthen our strategic plan. We have added some new criteria for projects, including putting priority on university business partnerships, interregional projects that link our economy to the rest of the state, and projects that directly involve significant business development, business investment. The progress report also includes some priorities, the priorities for competitive funding round in the coming round, priority projects for the CFA process, which we think will help build the economy of the 5 boroughs, and projects that we think are important for consideration for future funding or for other funding streams that the state may have available. So I think that pretty well covers it. The report was adopted a few minutes ago, and we're pleased to be going forward.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, Joe Taswell. We don't have a gold watch for you, Joe, but we have great affection and great respect for you. Joe has been indefatigable in his focus and attention in keeping us on track to meet various deadlines. Joe is on his phone constantly, on his BlackBerry or iPhone. I don't know which instrument you use, Joe, but you've really been an essential ingredient here in helping this council get its work done, and all of us owe you a debt of great gratitude, because I do not believe we would be here today and have enacted what I think is a very, very forward-thinking 2012 progress report if it were not for your very hard work and great guidance. So thank you, Joe, very much. We have been joined by Megan Daly. Megan, nice to see you. Of the Governor's Office to provide details on a timeline and upcoming regional council events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to just second that working with Joe and the council in New York City has been an absolute pleasure. Joe is a true professional, and also too, I was able to review the draft document myself. It's exceptional. It's a nice report on the regional councils, but also the New York City economic development in general. Nicely done. What I wanted to do today was give a brief update on, in terms of the regional councils, where we are, where we've come, and what is next in terms of the timeline. Just could use a little assistance in advancing the slides. Maybe that's it.
Is this the slide?
If you did advance it, that would be great. Thanks, Andrew. So a couple of things. I wanted to just reflect on 2011 implementation, and that's what we've been talking about this year too, implementing the strategic plans in all of the regional councils. And a component of that too are the projects that were funded in 2011 that are ongoing now, and the team of state professionals from all of the CFA agencies as well as the regional councils in terms of advancing those projects, close to 740 projects that were awarded last round. I'll talk a little bit more about a program that we've actually designed and put in place to show the tracking of those projects internally as well as public. Also, I'll talk a little bit more about the progress in getting us to this stage in terms of the workshops and the CFA activity that's occurred in 2012, and also the due date this Friday that all regional councils are looking at and what comes next. And I wanted to just talk a little bit more too about the Governor's Regional Council Summit that was 2 weeks ago, and a couple of announcements that came out of that. The 2011 CFA project tracking, what's so exciting about this component is we are doing a very strong effort to advance those projects in terms of having regular calls by region with all CFA agencies and professionals and the regional director to take a look at where those projects stand, how to advance them in terms of getting contracts, getting to the next level of work, and also eventually dispersing funds to those projects. This has now become a public website. Actually, if you go to the Regional Council website, which has just a wealth of information about the program in general, but this site you can go to and pick on one of the flags for the projects, or sift by agency or sift by region, in fact, and just get an update on a project description, how much was awarded, and what is the most current status of that. So as we are looking at this next round, we don't want to lose sight of the action and the activity from last round, and it's going to be exciting to see when the next round of projects is added to this, just sort of the compounding transformation happening in regions. So if you haven't looked at that, please go and check out the site. I wanted to, in context, put our calendar and our schedule for what's happening right now. So as we've discussed, the CFA deadline was July 16th, and what happened after that was the endorsement from the regions, as well as the technical assessment by all of the CFA agencies. And that was all completed and submitted as of August 27th. This Friday, we will be getting the progress reports from all the regions, as well as those priority project endorsements from the regions, to really identify what is the most important and significant in terms of advancing the plans that were established by each of the region. And then what happens is the interagency review of those CFA and those projects, as well as an assessment team of the progress reports from all the region, and that happens simultaneously. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the oral presentation component of the regional councils as well. And then the goal is the awards and the announcements in late fall. So in addition to what the Chancellor had commented before on the Regional Council Summit, for me it was especially exciting outside of the competition to see all of the regional councils talk about the progress and the innovation that is happening in the regions. And it was especially exciting for me to see when another region was presenting, other regions talk to each other and make notes on some of the exciting things that were going on, or some of the things that they wanted to pursue or might be a good idea to collaborate among regions. And that was, I think, really the spirit of this too, is how do we advance action in economic development ideas across the state. Another exciting announcement of that day was a broadband fund, so a fund dedicated just to broadband projects, which I know is a critical item in this council and that we've talked about this morning. The governor and lieutenant governor announced a $25 million competitive broadband program. Applications are currently going on now. Those are due October 5th. And those will follow the same guidance of the Regional Council, the CFA. It goes through the CFA program, and it also includes a 20% endorsement from the regional councils on those projects. And then the other announcement, which I think is exciting, is that the governor and lieutenant governor announced that the oral presentations by regions this year will happen actually in the regions. So this is going to be an exciting opportunity for the regional councils to highlight their implementation, their progress actually on their home turf. So what's happening now is that the review of the CFAs, also these progress reports, implementation agendas that are due this Friday, and then what will begin next and we'll announce is the schedule in September and October for those presentations across the state, and then working toward the award announcements later in the fall. I just had wanted to sort of give a picture of where the review process is in terms of how it works with the CFAs. We're right in the center there where that brightest gold is in terms of the interagency review and coordination, and that's the phase that we're just going into now. So this is where it comes together, where the 20% endorsement from the regions, which has occurred, it comes together with the technical scores from the agencies. And that's where these teams come together in this interagency review that's about to kick off. Friday will be our first official meeting with all of the agencies coming together in Albany, bringing together their technical assessments, as well as in preparation for the endorsements from each of the regional councils on what the priority projects are. So what that interagency review looks like is a staff professional from each and every one of the agencies that participate in the CFA funding. They bring their assessment of each of the projects. We received 2,800 CFA applications statewide this year. And this will bring together the prioritization and the technical assessment from those agencies, and also consider funding recommendations based on the applications and right-sizing what the recommendation for funding should be, not necessarily just what the request was, and also take a look at the recommendations from each of the councils to serve the alignment of the strategic plans that were created in 2011. So again, the progress reports that are submitted on Friday, they will all be made public. We will be receiving electronic copies this Friday, and then also the hard copies on Monday. We will make those public so we can see the statewide submissions. And the team that is reviewing those progress reports is going to be doing their work at the same time that the interagency team is reviewing the CFA project. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that review process. This is the competition. This is where the governor and the legislature announced a little bit more enhanced funding this round for the competition. In total, there's $220 million of funds through the ESD capital funds and the Excelsior tax credits. This is statewide, and this is what all of the regions are competing for. This competition is really to incentivize implementation and progress. And that's a critical component that last year we identified those plans, and this year it was to operationalize that activity and make sure things move forward, which is a testament to today's activity and all of the activity happening in the councils across the state. So how that competition works is there's two components to that. The best plan winners from last year, 4 of those will compete among each other for 2 awards of up to $25 million in capital funds. At the same time, the 6 non-best plan winners will compete among themselves for 3 awards of $25 million. So there'll be 5 best implementation award winners this round. The remaining regions will share the remaining funds of up to $5 million in capital funds, as well as additional Excelsior tax credits. This is the competition component, and this is in addition to all of the remaining CFA resources that are a part of the regional councils in 2012, approximately $760 million in resources statewide. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that implementation assessment team that is reviewing the progress reports. They're really going to be evaluating the submissions based on any refinements that were made to the plans, the update on implementation activity, and really the progress on action, how those projects that were awarded last year are proceeding, how collaboration is really making economic development advance in the region. And so a component of this is going to be these presentations that are happening. Really, the schedule will be focused on October this year, where we will work with all of the regions to do not only the oral presentations and that review panel in the regions, but also to do a tour to highlight some of the implementation from 2011 and also the vision for 2012 of what each regional council is endorsing as important for projects to advance the plan in 2012. The format of how that will work is that each regional council will get to select a location that would work for the panel to to participate in the presentation, as well as allow the public to participate and really hear more about the implementation. This will also include a tour where we'll be able to actually stop and see a project that was a component of the 2011 implementation activity. And then this leads to the announcements in late fall in terms of the competition as well as the CFA project awards altogether. So more to come in late fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. That was very helpful and very thorough. Very much appreciate that. I assume you will get to us as early as possible about when this will be scheduled?
Absolutely.
Okay, that would be great. Good, thank you. Okay, any questions? Any questions of Megan Daly on her presentation? Thanks, Megan. I'd like now to ask Tim Sullivan, who is representing Deputy Mayor Steele today, to provide a status report on new investment in the 15 opportunity zones identified in our strategic plan. I note that this presentation is referenced in our progress report. And Tim, there you are. The podium is yours.
Thank you and good morning, Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chancellor. Thank you for the opportunity to present before you this morning and represent Deputy Mayor Steele and give a brief update on the progress we've made in the 15 opportunity zones identified by the Regional Council last year. The work that we're going to talk about this morning really foots nicely to a lot of things we've been focused on in the city from an economic development perspective. The first, of course, is the four-tiered principles that we talked about in the strategic report last year of focusing on quality of life, creating a pro-growth environment, investing in the future and in infrastructure, and in fostering innovation and economic transformation. It also foots to Plan YC, which is the mayor's plan to support sustainable growth that will accommodate the 1 million more New Yorkers we're expecting by 2030. Those two plans, the Regional Council plan last year and Plan YC, sort of speak to the what and the how of economic development, and that's complemented by the where of economic development, and that's the 5-borough economic opportunity plan that I'm happy to talk about this morning. In the last 11 years, 36% of the city has been rezoned to catalyze economic growth and provide room for new businesses and new housing. That's room for 60,000 units of housing, of which 11,000 are affordable, and it's not on the slide, but there's also capacity created for 41 million square feet of commercial space. That's driven economic growth throughout the 5 boroughs, and as you can see on the bottom of the slide, we're quite proud of this statistic. In the last 10 years, which is the most recent data we have available, job growth outside Manhattan has actually been more rapid than job growth inside Manhattan. In the case of the Bronx and Brooklyn, it's quite more rapid than in Manhattan. Of course, there's more to do, and you're never done with job creation and growing the economy, but we're very proud of the fact that outside Manhattan has grown more rapidly than inside Manhattan, thanks to the kind of investments we're going to talk about this morning. And that's from there, that's where the Regional Council Opportunity Zones flows. There are 15 opportunity zones that the council identified last year, spread throughout the boroughs, as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that of the $66 million awarded to the city last year in the CFA process, more than 50 million, or 77%, were located in opportunity zones, which have fueled job creation, attracted private investment in neighborhoods throughout the city. And this morning, I'll just touch very briefly on a few updates in each of those zones. And for those scoring at home, I'm going to go in alphabetical order by borough. I'm not playing favorites in any way. We'll start with Hunts Point, which of course was the recipient of the largest CFA grant last year from the Regional Council, focused principally on the redevelopment of the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center. Since that time, the full funding from the public sector has been identified for that project, including a recent announcement from the governor and from the mayor, with support from the 2 senators and the congressional delegation of an additional $25 million of federal CMAQ funding for the market. And of course, that project is also being supported by the council and by Borough President Diaz as well, who are important partners. And I should note here, we remain confident that the market redevelopment will happen, that the 3,000 jobs, good-paying jobs in the Bronx will stay where they belong in the Bronx, and we're confident about that. Moving along within the Bronx, the South Bronx is also another opportunity zone where we focused. Of course, the state has been instrumental in 2 important projects that are, or 2 important development opportunities within the South Bronx, and that's Smith Electric Vehicles and Fresh Direct. There's also some projects that we've advanced, like the Randall's Island Connector, which has applied for funding in this round of funding. At the Brooklyn Navy Yard, the Lieutenant Governor and the Deputy Mayor were together in May to announce the groundbreaking for the Green Manufacturing Center, which will create hundreds of jobs and attract significant private investment to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is a tremendous success story by any measure. And of course, there's an important series of projects that have been recommended for funding for the Navy Yard in this in this round of funding as well. The Navy Yard, of course, is a tremendous success story with 275 businesses and almost 6,000 employees working at what was once a derelict, abandoned military base in the heart of Brooklyn. At Coney Island, it was another great summer this summer since the new amusements opened in 2009. This summer, 2 acres more of the Scream Zone opened. We broke ground on infrastructure improvements that are needed to accommodate the growth out there. And we also broke ground at Steeplechase Plaza, which will be, and Coney Island Commons, which will provide retail and affordable housing for the neighborhood. In downtown Brooklyn, there's so much going on, of course. In April, Mayor Bloomberg and NYU President Sexton and MTA Chairman Joe Lhota announced the agreement to create the Center for Urban Science and Progress in downtown Brooklyn, which is a consortium led by NYU, but that features and includes not only corporate partners, but also university partners from around the world. It's led by a fellow named Steve Koonin, who had been a senior scientist at BP, who had been the provost at Caltech, and who had also had a senior position at the Department of Energy. So he brings a unique mix of public, private, and academic sector experience to that project, which will transform 370 J Street in downtown Brooklyn. And of course, we'd be remiss to not mention that we're all excited in a few weeks to be seeing the opening of the Barclays Center, which will, of course, return Major League sports to Brooklyn. In Greenpoint, Williamsburg, there's been a flurry of recent news. Just earlier this week, WNYC Transmitter Park was opened. McCarran Park Pool reopened this summer. And of course, Greenpoint and Williamsburg are 2 of the neighborhoods that are benefiting the most from the very successful East River Ferry service, which is bringing hundreds of thousands of people moving throughout the boroughs. Moving on to Southwest Brooklyn, perhaps the thing I'd note here is the last item on the page, the reopening of the 65th Street rail yard and the float bridge in Southwest Brooklyn, which will really empower the working waterfront in Sunset Park. The Brooklyn Army Terminal doesn't get as much attention as the Brooklyn Navy Yard, its cousin, but it's now more than 90% leased in Sunset Park, which is an exciting opportunity to bring lots of jobs to that neighborhood. And importantly, in partnership with the federal government, which sold a building recently, Federal Building Number 2, Salmar Properties broke ground on that redevelopment project this year as well. Moving over to Manhattan, 125th Street, the city's EDC and ESD together jointly issued an RFP for the redevelopment of 121 West 125th Street for retail, office, and cultural space, and began the redevelopment of the Corn Exchange building. So a lot of exciting things happening in Upper Manhattan as well. At Hudson Yards, there was an agreement announced between Coach and the developers that they will be the anchor tenant of the first tower on the far west side. Ground is broken on Hudson Boulevard Park, and that will open begin to take the shape of the neighborhood. Hudson Yards, is worth remembering, will, when it's complete, be home to 120,000 new jobs, thanks to the extension of the number 7, which is being, of course, worked on by the MTA. And the MTA this year completed the critical tunneling work that will allow that operations to begin in 2013 on the number 7 extension to 34th and 11th, which will really activate the neighborhood. And then, of course, the day after 9/11, of course, is an appropriate day to mark the progress in Lower Manhattan. Yesterday was, of course, a day of unity and reflection, but it's also important to note the progress that's been the result of an extraordinary commitment from the federal, state, and city governments to rebuild Lower Manhattan. There are more jobs today in Lower Manhattan than there were prior to the attacks. The population of Lower Manhattan has almost doubled, which is an extraordinary success story that I don't think a lot of people would have bet on 11 years ago. And of course, you can see on the picture, that's One World Trade Center, which is now at 104 stories. So the development continues to make tons of progress there. Away from the World Trade Center site, there's been agreements to redevelop the South Street Seaport. The city closed on a transaction to redevelop the Battery Maritime building, which will include a hotel. And so the progress of Lower Manhattan has just been extraordinary and something that everyone can be proud of. Moving on to Queens, Flushing and Willets Point. The most noteworthy thing to mention here is, of course, the redevelopment of Willets Point, which was announced earlier this year, which will bring $3 billion of private investment to Willets Point, which has long been an economic development target for many, many years. other thing I note about Willets Point that's very exciting from a redevelopment perspective is that the first phase of this project includes the environmental remediation of the site, which has been a real issue for that community and an issue for Flushing Bay, into which it leaks contaminants. So that's an important environmental and economic development improvement. In Jamaica, we completed the reconstruction of Sutton Underpass, and the city released an RFP for the redevelopment of a building at the corner of Sutton Boulevard and Archer Avenue. In Long Island City, just recently the new sign for JetBlue was lit to mark JetBlue's opening of their headquarters. And Long Island City, of course, is also benefiting from the East River Ferry as well. The city also announced in conjunction with the developer and, of course, with the state, who's our partner in affordable housing, that the first phase of Hunters Point South, which will be a 900 unit development that will be opening in 2014, will be 100% affordable, which is really an extraordinary accomplishment, and it will be a magnificent waterfront affordable housing community with magnificent views of Manhattan. It'll be the largest, when Hunters Point South is completed, it'll be the largest affordable housing development since the early 70s in the city. Moving over to Staten Island, on the North Shore, perhaps the most exciting thing going on that I'd mention is the active negotiations for the redevelopment of a significant portion of the St. George waterfront adjacent to the ferry terminal and the ballpark, which we think could be a game changer for the North Shore. And finally, on the West Shore, there's two projects that are going on that are very exciting. One is the redevelopment of a site in Charleston for retail parks, a library, public school, and housing, and also the redevelopment of the Arthur Kill Correctional Facility, which ESD issued an RFP for earlier this year. So, as you can see, lots of progress throughout the city. Hopefully I didn't take too long. I could have gone on in much more detail about almost any one of those zones. I'd note in closing that on behalf of the mayor and the deputy mayor, we'd also like to thank Kathy and Joe and Suri for their partnership in the regional council process and for their leadership and their help in driving so many of these key projects. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Tim, thank you. That was a fabulous report, uplifting, and really takes your breath away. Any questions of Tim Sullivan? Thank you very much, Tim. It's great. Oh,
I didn't know if anybody had any questions. When I made out talked about, we didn't talk about the mitigation, the projects that the city has put together that are 5 borough priority projects. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about that or not, if people felt they understood it. We didn't mention them before.
Tim, do you want to give?
Sure, the one brief comment I'd offer, there were some comments offered earlier about equity between the boroughs, and there are several projects that have been put forward and recommended by the report that you have in front of you that are really citywide in focus, and there's 3 that immediately come to mind. There's probably more. The mitigation banking project, which is something that the city and the state are working on together, which is a really important priority for waterfront redevelopment, has 5-borough application or 5-borough scope. The broadband program, which is very complementary to what the governor announced in August, has a 5-borough focus, and in fact is focused outside Manhattan, and will hopefully help activate and create jobs in the other 4 boroughs. And the final one is the brownfield remediation program, which has been put forward for funding, which has a relatively small investment for a potentially very large return in all 5 boroughs. And those are 3 very exciting projects that we appreciate the council support on, appreciate everyone's leadership in advancing.
Great to be your partner. This concludes our formal agenda. Any last words before we adjourn? If not, thank you all for the extraordinary work that you do, and we all look forward to continuing our partnership. We are adjourned.